Welcome to the Muscle Expert Podcast with Ben Pakulski, one of the world's top professional bodybuilders, an expert on human performance and mindset mastery. Ben dives deep to deliver the strategies of the top experts to upgrade your body, mind, muscle, strength, performance, biochemistry, and how to become the upgraded modern man.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Muscle Expert Podcast. If you like to work out, you're going to love this podcast. You guys know I frame my podcast around living your greatest life in your greatest body. Exercise is a huge part of that. And unfortunately, it seems as though most of the people in this world do not do exercise very, very well. It's not efficient. It's not effective. Most people think they're not getting results because they don't have the genetics, they don't have the time, they're not putting in the work. The reality is none of that is true. You have the ability to do it. You just haven't learned the skills yet. And Mr. Eric Seifert is a great friend of mine who lives in Toronto, and he is the master of teaching skills based around exercise. He's also a master of muscle activation techniques. You guys have recently heard my podcast with Greg Roscoff, the creator of muscle activation techniques, and Eric is the second in command. He's amazing at healing somebody's body. If you have any injuries or if you want to learn how to exercise, I highly suggest you get over to his business in Toronto called Core Muscle Activation. Eric and I discuss everything from rehab to training and effective modalities to look at how to truly begin to integrate this intelligent approach to exercise and still maximize results. Obviously, you guys know for many years I towed the line of like, hey, how hard can we train? And how do we have to keep this perfect form, or can we be a little bit loose? And honestly, in my wisdom, after 20 years of bodybuilding, I realized there really is no value. There's really no place for loose form. There's really no value in forced repetitions that are forcing you to have poor execution and recruit other muscles. It just doesn't make any sense. And Eric and I get into all of these very interesting, very educational, highly enlightening conversations. You're going to learn a lot about rehab. You're going to learn a lot about the thought process behind intelligent exercise strategies. I know you're going to love this podcast. And if you do, please listen all the way to the end and share with at least one person you know who's struggling right now to build their greatest body, because this information is absolutely priceless and you could save somebody years, including yourself, in building your greatest body and living your greatest life. Guys, I appreciate you so much. I hope you're having an amazing day. I hope you're loving the podcast. Thank you all so much for the reviews. Enjoy my conversation with my great friend, Eric Seifert.
Hey guys, before we get rolling with this podcast, I want to talk to you about your health. And you know the framing of this podcast is living your greatest life in your greatest body. And that's kind of become my mission now, is how can I, one, extend my life, two, extend the ease at which I approach this life. You know, I don't want to have to burn the candle at both ends. I don't want to have to hashtag crush it every day. I want to work hard, but I also want to work smart, and I know you do too. And taking care of your health in the back end is a massively important aspect of optimizing performance, optimizing brain function. So what I want to talk to you about today is paying attention to your health. So obviously, vegetables, micronutrients, macronutrients are all a big thing. One thing I've been doing for a long time is paying attention to how many vegetables I get in a day. And, you know, some people say you need to get at least 8, and some people say you need to get at least 15, and who knows what the real answer is. But what I do know is it's important, and I know it's important to get a lot of micronutrients. And it's been suggested that multivitamins don't really work, and, taking a vitamin in isolation oftentimes we know does not work because it's dependent on cofactors and other vitamins and minerals to actually improve absorption. So for a lot of time, for many years, I was juicing, and I'm still an advocate of juicing. I think it's important. I think it's a great way to get coenzymes and a lot of micronutrients. But gosh, it's so time-consuming and so expensive. So the thing that I've started doing lately is just using my Simple Greens juice at least once a day, sometimes twice. And you guys know that Organifi has been a guest on the show, Drew Canoli has, and they're awesome enough to sponsor the podcast. And why I love Organifi, one, it tastes great. I'm actually drinking some right now. It's containing 8 things that we know to be really, really great for us, starting with wheatgrass, moving on to spirulina, things like chlorella, green tea matcha. It's also got some awesome adaptogens in there. So if you're not already taking ashwagandha, it's something that perhaps is one of the best things to be taking. It's got beetroot, turmeric, a lot of other awesome ingredients that are really going to help you to kind of make sure you're covering your bases in the back end and allow your body to do its natural detox thing, to do its natural detox function day to day. Now, I don't recommend taking this stuff around your workout. I recommend taking it usually at night. Sometimes I start my day with it if I know I'm not going to be training early in the morning. It's almost a replacement for coffee for me because, coffee we know is going to be spiking our cortisol. It's going to be driving our adrenal stress up. And on certain days of the week, adrenal stress isn't going to be very good for us. And most of us listening to this are probably going to have some degree of adrenal stress, some degree of adrenal overload. So taking something you know is going to give you the energy you need without sacrificing your health on the back end. So the framing of this podcast is helping you and helping me live our greatest life in our greatest body. And that starts, guys, with optimizing your health. So I want to take this time to give a shout out to one of our key sponsors, and that's Organifi, who has been taking care of me for a while. Drew is an amazing human being. If you haven't already listened to the podcast I did with Drew Canoli, check it out because he's a super bright guy. And he started this company for a reason, and he's helping a lot of people. They're a massively growing company, and they're hooking me up, 20% off at Organifi.com if you use the code Muscle Intelligence. And you guys know this is all about intelligence, living the greatest life in your greatest body. Enjoy the rest of the show.
And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to welcome my great friend, Eric Seifert from Core Muscle Activation in Toronto. I've been working with Eric for, a long time. 2007 is when I met you. And I talk about all these people who have kind of, taken my head and turned it just a little bit in the right direction over the last 10 years. And Eric's definitely been one of those people to steer my thought process more than anybody. I mean, the three biggest influences of my thought process over the years, as I always give you credit, is Tom Purvis, Peter Jason, and yourself, Eric Seifert. And from an exercise perspective, man, like nobody's on your level as far as exercise cueing and explaining it in a way that's easy to understand. So I'm so grateful for that. And jumping off point today, as we briefly started talking about before I neglected to hit record, is please explain your definition of function and dysfunction and how you approach that. And you briefly, eloquently explain that in almost a continuum. I'd love to hear that.
So I have a lot of if I kind of define our demographics here, at our place, you're going to see a lot of people that are at the highest end of what they demand of their body, the people that push themselves like elite athletes, in some cases are elite athletes. And then you're going to see a group of people that are at the sort of middle range where they kind of are trying to push themselves. They don't really know how well they move. Their problems aren't that severe yet, that kind of thing. And then I have a bunch of people at the bottom end of the continuum that are obviously circling the drain almost. They're like, man, there's something wrong. They're very aware there's something wrong. So, one end of performance, might still be having trouble and dysfunctional, but the body is just that strong. So it's kind of funny to think that you could be an elite athlete and still be so broken. And most of us, we think the people at the on the winner's circle or sitting up on the podium are just perfect. And the reality is there's not a single athlete that I've ever, when I've been around tournaments and I've been traveled over the world and helped athletes, every single person that was on the podium at some point was in the med tent.
Yeah, and they're just really good at compensating, right? Their body figures out a way like, okay, this is broken. Let's substitute this guy in there to make this move a little better, changes their mechanics, allows them to complete the event or endeavor that they're trying to do. Yeah. But then they've developed that compensation pattern with, if not corrected, doing what you do is going to eventually turn into this massive dysfunction circling down the drain. Like you said.
Like elite athletes are being measured. Like, I don't know how fast I run my 40 time, and I doubt but when you're competing, you knew what you could bench press, you knew what you could squat, and if there was a drop in performance, you'd be keenly aware that whoa, something's changed. The rest of us that aren't being measured on that level don't have metrics to establish. It's just more like, I'm sore today, or I'm tired today, or whatever. And so we can slide further and further into dysfunction because we have no metrics to really measure against.
It's true. That's a very important thing. That's actually how I frame my training now, is I have these like core things that I want to make sure that I can always do. Right. And that's really it. As long as I can do that, no matter what my body feels like, or, I'm good. I'm doing all right here.
Yeah. You've got measures. Yeah. And I think most people just, they just don't realize how much dysfunction they can accommodate. That's a very funny thing, right? Like, the human body is a solution-driven mechanism, so it's trying to find a solution all the time. It's not like, oh, I lost something in quadrant 12, so we're just going to stand here until I can recover. I'm middle of a sidewalk right now,
Right.
but it's okay. I'll
Middle
just
of the
wait
forest,
for me.
hang out, somebody will come get you.
It's all good,
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the body's like, I'm going to plug in whatever I have to plug in. I'm going to move the way I have to move. I'm going to compensate. And it's kind of funny when people say compensation, I always laugh. It's like they're cheating. That's a bad thing. And
Right.
I'm like, that's just a solution. Yeah.
That's a brilliant thing though, man. Just thinking about that. How grateful am I for our body, right? Like how we've evolved to your body just never leaves you hanging, man. You could just punish it and damage it and just always got your back.
Yeah. The funny part, then that's really where I get to intercede, right? I get to jump in and kind of interact with these humans that are, in some cases really being held to a high standard. In some cases don't even know what's going on. They're just deciding there's something not moving well. And then another section where they're like, man, I know there's a problem. I have pain that is not going away. I have movement that there's a lot of things that I can't do. My activities of daily living are getting harder and harder and harder.
How do you begin to objectively assess what optimal is?
Obviously the biggest challenge in our communities of fitness and wellness is we don't know what fitness is and we don't know what wellness is. When somebody says, I want to be well, I'm here for the wellness. I'm not really sure what that really means. Yeah, how do I define that? So for most of the time, when you're trying to build this is the exercise program for everybody. This is what a squat looks like, or this is what you should feel like in the morning. Those are contextually useless. Like that doesn't describe anybody's life. So a lot of times I have to establish that with a client. They're going to come in and I'm going to ask, what are we really measuring? What can't you do? Like an M.A.T thing, muscle activation thing is very often kind of out of Greg's world, Greg Roscoe's world is, I don't really care what you can do. I'm more importantly interested in what you can't. And so that's where I start my measures. What can't you do,
Yeah, and so the brilliance of M.A.T is just, looking at what range of motion you have available to you and seeing what the greatest differential is and how you address it.
Yeah, so that sense of the body laying out a map, usually when I'm teaching students with M.A.T, a lot of times I'm saying, it's kind of funny, my wife calls them the digging shows, all those like Gold Rush and all these shows on TV. They don't just dig. You can kind of think like when you look at Alaska and you think these shows, because they show you such a weird perspective that you just think, put a shovel in the ground and there's gold everywhere in Alaska. But they know where to dig. They know, there's patterns. They know, and they do things like core samples.
Yeah.
Right. And those things cost money. So they don't just throw every of those like, $1,000, just do 500,000 of those and we'll know where to dig. Like they have to be specific where they look. Mm-hmm. So clients come in with symptoms. They come in with patterns. They come in with problems, and they give you clues as to where to look. And then you start applying a range of motion exam to decide not really what their joint surfaces are doing, but what their muscles can do. And once they start to you compare one side compared to the other, and they're not moving symmetrically, the body's had to come up with a solution for that. The body's had to say, well, I can't use my hip that way. I'll use my back that way until I can't use that solution, and I'll use my ankle a certain way. No, I can't do that. I'll use my back to do something different. And I'll use my shoulder for that. And we've seen people move. As trainers, we've watched people move well and we've watched people move poorly. The question is, there's not really much to watch a trainer look and decide, yeah, that looks good. No, that doesn't look good. The question is, what do you do with that information?
That's exactly it. And that's one of the biggest paradigm shifts that I took from you guys is most trainers, most athletes are going to see some bilateral disparity. Like they're going to, hey, this is not working the same as that, so I need to try to fix it. And I'd love for you to talk about that. Like, what strategic approach are you going to take if you see someone coming in exercising and have massive bilateral disparities? Should they be making an attempt to correct them? Is there any value in trying to correct them? Is there, is it an activation thing? Is it just letting your body do what it wants to do? I'd love for you to talk about that because that's a very, very misunderstood area.
Yeah, so there's lots to unpack in those questions, but the first part, most people, if I'm assessing, usually if they're coming to me, there's usually a problem.
Sure.
So my demographic is already in that sort of direction. And I don't walk up to somebody in a gym and go, hey,
that's really messed up. You should have a look. You have somebody look at that.
Here's a card, see me in 5 years. I don't, it's like an ambulance chaser or something.
But
like
you could do that too.
I could. Yeah. It's a scary thought, but
literally you could be like, you're going to need to see me in 6 months. I won't feel like I'm at that point now. Like
somehow no one would thank me for that. I don't know why, but
Well, and depending how strong somebody is, right? I told you I was training with somebody this morning, super strong. I'm like, you've got about 6 to 12 months left before something seriously explodes.
Before your kneecaps.
Like, here's Eric's card.
Cerebral spinal fluid. Yeah. I think there's a lot of, because they can lift that heavy, because they are that strong. I mean, we go back to the original demographic of those elite athletes or people that consider themselves and train like elite athletes. Because they can lift a lot of weight, it's indicative that they're doing it right. And so that's, where
By their definition?
By their definition.
Right.
I had an athlete that was front squatting, football player, huge human, like fills up the door frame kind of thing. He's front squatting 3 plates for reps, and I looked at what he was doing, and I could see stuff on the table, and I said, okay, well, you're doing it wrong. And he sort of pats me on the head, and Eric, like, I'm lifting a lot of weight.
I did that to you guys when I started.
Yeah, I'm lifting a lot of weight.
Dude, look at my legs.
And I said, just because you can lift more weight than me doesn't mean you're lifting as much weight as you can lift.
Right.
And so that's, the difference. Sure enough, the next workout, we adjusted some things. I worked on some stuff on the table.
What was he doing wrong? I wouldn't mind hearing.
Well, mostly just how he's initiating motion.
Yeah.
So, it was a big load. I mean, he's a big 300-pound human, and he's
315 pounds is not a lot of weight in a front squat, though. Like,
no, to me it is, but to him, I was like, there's
a football player, that's not a lot of weight.
No, I mean, to the world class guys up in that's not a huge thing. But the next time he worked out, he put 4 plates on the bar. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty substantial increase when he's
initiating spinal movement, initiating hip movement,
understanding ankle motions, and so he'd had a hyperextend. He was at a pro tryout. He hyperextended his knee, and that's how he got introduced to me. His strength coach sent him to me, and so we went through some stuff. And he had shin splints. I didn't know, but I'm working on his knee and helping his knee. And he comes in, and I see a bunch of things that are going on that are creating problems. And he's got a very small time window to get to his pro testing. And so I'm like, all right, let me help you out. He phones me the next day and says, I got to come in. So I come to the phone. I'm like, okay, is the knee hurting again? He said, no, the knee feels amazing. I said, well, why do you need to come in? He said, well, I didn't tell you that I have shin splints for my entire career in college on both my legs. And I don't have shin splints on my left leg that you worked on. So you have to work on my other leg.
Fix it.
You have to fix this other thing that,
or break the other one again so I can go back to where I was before.
I guess so. That I didn't even know that problem was there or fixable. And I'm just looking at how can I get this guy's knee ready for, and in fixing his foot mechanics, and working through his foot mechanics and creating the solution there, he was like, wow, I didn't know that problem was fixable.
To me, right?
Yeah. Right.
When I first started, I tell this story all the time, and it's a good story, so I'll share it quickly. Like, I went in to be treated by Peter in 2007, and I said I had a knee problem, and he started to mess with my feet. And I said, hey, man, like, I'd never met him. I may have met him before. I was like, hey, man, the problem's in my knee. He goes, just let me do my thing. So manipulates my feet. I leave, and I shit you not, then the pain went from the right knee into the left knee. Exact same pain. Right knee was fine. Left knee was they give me the same pain. I was like, this is weird because that pain's been in my right knee for 3 months. So I called him like, hey, dude, what'd you do? And then I went back the next time he fixed it, never came back. It's pretty incredible stuff, man. People living with pain don't realize what's possible. They just, it's like waking up with back pain, right? You go, oh, I just wake up with back pain.
I earned that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I had a bodybuilder come in with a huge amount of, he'd done a big leg press workout, epic leg press workout, I don't know, 79 plates aside, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Like something that I would
go, bounced it off his nose.
Yeah, like there's 17 people jumped on the leg press, and and so he came in with crippling leg pain, right? And he's like, oh yeah, my leg is killing me, my legs, but I earned that. You're gonna find I knocked that stuff out. It's going to be really, I blew up all my legs, and I was like, okay, well, let's take a look. And sure enough, his legs are moving fine, but his ankle on one side is not moving very well. Mm-hmm. And so I said, oh, wow, got no dorsiflexion on this side, and there's some motions that are missing. So I start treating some stuff. And, it works out that we can restore some range of motion very quickly. And he gets up off the table, and the look of shock on his face is all his quad pain is gone.
That happened to me too.
Right? Yeah, very similar. And so he's looking like, what did you do? Like, my badge, because that's really mostly what when I was a kid, it was like lift weights and then wait to see what you did to yourself.
Sure, yeah.
And that was more like your badge.
If my quads hurt and my knees and my back don't, I win.
Yeah, I win. Yeah. And so to me, I was like, it was a question of, I don't know if that's the case with everybody, but I've seen it over and over and over again that some muscle dysfunction at another joint can cause this system to be saying, I must, my quads must be the brake for my feet, that kind of thing. And the funny thing was, it was both his feet. It was one ankle that was creating this, and his body was registering pain. So, and it wasn't like, I treated his one ankle, he lost, he got, no pain on one side. He lost pain on both. And so I wouldn't pretend to have the hubris to say, I could predict that. It was, I don't know, let me see. I always say, like a friend of mine used to say, I'm smart enough and stupid enough to try,
Sure.
Could you help that? I don't know.
I don't know if we finished that loop, but I want to go down this path.
Okay, go back.
I want to go down this path of exercise because, you built this continuum out saying you have these people who are high performers, and then you have these people who are beginning to break, and then you have people who are, circling down the drain. Assuming a listener is well-functioning, whatever that means, how do they prevent themselves exercise-wise? I know that's not – I know you're amazing at exercise, so I want to go there because people don't get this. How do they begin to frame their exercise experience around not going down the slippery slope?
Yeah, no, there's some solutions there. So there's some actionables for sure. So one of the things that I would say when I'm talking to most athletes if we're talking about technique first, so how well you do something is very different than how many did I do. And almost all of us that don't know how well we do anything just focus on what dumbbell size was it, what rep number was it,
how far did it move,
how far did I move, how long did I move it. So all the quantitative measures are very easy to initially to start to go, man, look at that. I still don't like what I look in the mirror, but I'm moving to a bigger dumbbell. You know, I'm over at this side where the big guys lift, you know.
But my elbows and my knees really hurt now.
Yeah, but that's, if you look around that population, it is, we all have that kind of pain. Yep. So that seems normal, right? And what you should say is that's common, but that's not the same thing at all, right? Like, it's not normal. Every person that does bicep curls has pain in their elbow. No. But if you hang out with that population, you might go, yeah, man, we all have it. Okay.
Sure you do.
It's good. You earned it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think every bodybuilder in the world has elbow pain. Right. And in most instances, it comes from my experience, scapular instability. Yeah. You're pressing in some terrible way.
And fitting and shitty, excuse my language, but poor fitting of mechanics of the machine or of the exercise you created does not fit your joint system. So I don't know that. I mean, we're not small humans, but a lot of equipment is because someone says full range of motion. This gets back to your actionables. Full range of motion of what? So most people, when I talk to the bodybuilding community, there should be almost an inherent, when we talk about mind muscle or whatever, it's like the people that flex. I mean, we had this conversation years ago. You flexing tissue, you can feel your pecs. You flex tissue, you can feel your biceps. You flex tissue, you can feel your delts, whatever, because you pose with it, right? Most of us aren't doing as much posing as you would have in your day, but we're usually, when you can contract your bicep so well when you pose, and then I put a dumbbell in your hand, you go, I don't really feel my bicep until it gets this heavy. Part of me thinks, well, no, there's something wrong with the design of the exercise. There's something wrong with how you're understanding how to contract stuff. So a common thing that I might say that seems to make sense to that community is that your muscles are the actual vehicle and the dumbbell is the passenger. And most people reverse that. They make the dumbbell the vehicle and hopefully the
bicep comes along.
The biceps along for the ride. Yeah, like it's going to spill into the right area kind of thing. And they don't feel the exercises for either the whole range. So if I said, all right, well, show me what range you can move where you actually feel the contraction, and then show me what there's one of the quantitative things. Show me what weight you have to go to. And I don't believe in pre-exhaust exercise. I think that's horseshit thing that people are doing. My arms are so strong, I have to exhaust them before I feel my back, or I have to, or my arms give out before my back does. And, I
feel the same. There's one framing that I believe pre-exhaust makes sense for, but I won't. We'll talk about
so, okay, I'm sure you can find a context, but for the most general thing, I don't agree with that. And I think most people just don't know how to contract anything. Yeah. And so an athlete, I just reduce loads, I reduce ranges. It's not baby weights. It's still, but I try and focus
as
on
much as you can control
intensity. Yeah, for sure. If you focus on intensity, sometimes people say, well, I'm so strong, I'm never going to feel that weight. Like usually when I ask somebody to lift a weight and I say, well, how much do you lift in that? They're telling me, how much that they've ever lifted that weight.
Well, we trained with 2 bodybuilders this morning, and we did 125-pound dumbbells on flat press. That was our working set. And the first set, they went and they each did 30 reps. And I was like, okay, well, now try it this way. And they got 6.
Right.
And that's a simple example, right? It's like, hey, so we'll stop using everything and let's use this.
Yeah.
And like, even that wasn't well executed, but it was better than it was
and it produced a very different change, right?
Very different
And
response.
so when you see somebody that can do 30 reps and say they don't even feel it because they're so strong, and then you change the way they do it, and now they can do 6. Right. So you made it so well that the quantity that they're normally not bothering with, all of a sudden became, wow, that I feel 6 solid reps. Now you can track that. Now you have a metric. And so if people are just thinking, I'll just go till I'm tired and I'll do these exercises because Joe Weider said this is where, this pours into my quads. And
muscle
this
confusion, man.
Muscle confusion, yeah. Muscle confusion.
How do people begin to qualify or maybe quantify, and I guess it's qualify the execution of a rep? Like, how do they know they're doing it well? Other than, yes, I can feel it. Like, there's always these subjective things thrown out there, the sound bites of, hey, man, full range of motion. And,
sure.
I'd like you to talk
So
about
full range of motion of a machine, full range of your exercise, or full range of motion you can. So very often when I explore this with people, the bodybuilding guys, they go, oh, you mean partials? I'm like, well, no, you just showed me how far you can move it. So that's your full range.
Right.
And if you move it further, or you don't fit the machine, but the bench press machine or whatever makes you, move to a full range, what you think before you get to a rack, or what you feel before, it's like, well, you don't fit most of that. So a lot of the machines have arcs and they have the ability to fit stuff. I think years ago we did a bent over row machine, like a T-bar row, and we kind of, and there was maybe about 3 inches on one of those handles where I was like, there. And you went, wow, I feel my lats. And then after that, it was forearms and that's back.
On my website.
Right. And so, yes, check out Ben's website.
Yeah, exactly. Shameless plug.
But that same thing that most people realize, the machine moves that far, therefore I should move that far. And it's like, well.
The bar must touch my chest, Eric.
Yes, if you have the size of Ben's chest, feel free. Or if you had big rib cage and little tiny arms, you're going to be a world-class bench presser.
Yeah, and even with my chest, I still can't touch my chest. And people think
forearms are too long.
Yeah, I think it's people like, oh man, something. I'm like, dude, I feel great.
Yeah.
That's as far as I've got. I still have 3 inches away from my chest, and that for me is a full range of motion. And people see me training, I'm like, hey man, how come you're using a small range?
How come you're using partials? Right.
And if I went any further, I'd have no more shoulders.
Yeah, then it turns into your pec is actually trying to shear your humerus forward as you go further and further back. I mean, that's the strategy behind trying to pin your shoulder blades back, but it's to try and kind of orient the glenoid to give you a little more room. Mm-hmm. But for most people, it should be called an out and an in, but it's called a press. So it's a forward and backward exercise, or, and it's like, that's not even the direction. Like a dumbbell is far superior on most levels to a bar, but who has, you can put 320 pounds on a bar and think,
it looks way cooler than 100.
Looks really cool, but most people don't even have 160-pound dumbbells.
Right.
And someone says that's the same amount of weight, and those of us that might lift anywhere close to those ranges go, that's not the same exercise at all.
Why is that?
Well, there's some mechanics involved, right, in terms of how stuff spreads things out. Certainly some moment arm things. Individual control. You're holding 260-pound planets. They want to move in their own directions separately and have opportunities to move. You're holding one bar that has, really a couple less directions it has to go. It's not going to twist and rotate and move around individually. So a whole bunch of stability factors, some moment arm challenges, right? So you can create some intention on maybe if the dumbbells are heavy enough, they want to travel in a straight line, maybe you create some intention, but they want to move where they want to move. In a bar, you can push in a couple of different directions. You can squeeze in, push out. You can kind of shift the load around and change some strategies. So, there's some advantages. I don't want to say it's a bad thing, but those are two very different exercises. Full range of motion with a bar is already going to be compromised.
Sure.
Your hands can't move in space,
Can you walk us down the path of what people should begin to do to assess what range of motion they have available to them?
Yeah. So if we borrow, Tom Purvis is one of my mentors, and if we borrow something Tom always says is sort of an exercise specific range of motion. So if you're going to look at a path of motion, and people, kind of visit, how much inter-rotation, how much extra-rotation, they visit, can I straighten my elbows in a bench press if I'm looking at that? If I'm looking more or less, how is that person going to explore that? If they can't move poorly, if they can't move without any weight in their hand, how are they going to put weight in their hand?
Right.
So a big one that I find that I hear power lifters will say this. I've had some guys in class, students of mine say, and I think it's regurgitated from other people. Like, I don't have full range of motion until I have 400 pounds on my back.
That's my favorite.
And I'm like, that means you don't have, what?
You're going to break soon.
You're going to break some stuff. Yeah. Or you're just relying on your body's ability to withstand that,
and for now.
Till it isn't, till it can't. And as I said, those athletes, they have metrics to establish that how good they are. And then something happens to those athletes where something really small takes them out and they just don't ever recover. And you're like, wow, really? That's what took them out? It's like, no, they're on a mountain of dysfunction that finally overcomes. And I'm sure you see that in the bodybuilding world, like guys that just show up and then tear a bicep and then they're gone. Or, they show up on the scene and they're like, wow, this is the next coming of... And then who was that guy again? And he's gone.
Right.
And it's like, well, they got injured. And they got injured in a way they couldn't recover from.
Yep.
Right? And they just didn't know how close they were to that line because they're pushing themselves like an elite athlete would to don't leave it in the gym,
Right. Can you define active range of motion? And is that just kind of the major governing principle for what people should be?
Yeah, 100%. If you can't move there under your own power, and I don't mean gravity driving you there or a bar shoving you there, then if you had no other goals, like I'm not needing to be judged in a competition, I don't mean a bodybuilding one. I mean like a powerlifting competition or a CrossFit competition or something like that, where that's what a good rep is, and there's a definite yes or no, then no one should be subjecting themselves to moving through ranges they can't control, and especially with extra load, momentum, inertial effects. Those are all things that I think are asking for trouble.
So talk to me about the mentality that people may think that will limit their progress. Like, hey man, I'm not using a full range of motion, therefore I will not get full results. I know they're using a full range of motion, that, but talk to me about that, because I know there's going to be a lot of listeners going, well, I have to take my knees to my ears on a leg press. I need to go ass to ankles on a squat. I need to touch my chest at a bench press. Can you unpack that whole thought process behind why that doesn't make any sense?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a psychology of I don't trust. This is what I've done to get me here. Or this is what there's a little bit of that in the bodybuilding community for sure.
Of course. And like I said, I was guilty of that because you're so resilient when you're young. Your body hasn't broken yet. You just need to break once, then you'll realize.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody telling you to not stop smoking or something like that. And you're like,
good, until you get lung cancer.
And it's so the reality of, could you reach out to people with some actionables before they get down that road without talking to them like when I have athletes or personalities that are all gas pedal.
You want to go, you idiot.
They're just go, 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 go. And if you talk to them like they're the brake, they stare at you like, I just want to not listen to what you just said.
Sometimes you just don't want to hear it as an athlete, right?
Yeah. And so I have to negotiate a little bit in that dialogue or try and really give them what they need through what they want, if I'm going to borrow that saying. And so the reality of most people, want to be told, how can I go farther? How can I go? And so I have to address that. How can I run farther? How can I run faster? How can I lift more weight? How can I be bigger? How can I be stronger? And so it's almost like if you really want to put the foundation together properly, because you've kind of sold out, like I'm happy to help you get it back on that path. But if you don't feel stuff, if you're moving through passive ranges, if you're, letting inertia do most of the work and you're just hoping to survive most of these exercises, you're going to pay a price. So I have to dialogue, sort of a outside of that environment. I have to have a dialogue that says, you really want this is how you do it. You really want this is how you do it. You really want that, this is how you do it. And I have to break it down in terms of things they can now finally measure. And when I can give someone an experience, like those guys doing 30 reps with 125-pound dumbbells, and they die at 6 reps, I guarantee you created some currency. You created some currency with them that said, wow, imagine what I would get out of 8 reps when I earned them. Well, imagine what it'll be like when I finally get back to 30 reps with this new technique. And so a lot of times, if you can establish, hey, let me show you a way you can do that without pain. Let me show you a way you can do that without, and get more of a sensation or a greater fitness experience, then most people who are giving up their mechanics just to feel like hopefully I can get more weight, get more thing. Because if they don't have results, they're just borrowing to try and do that. So you have to give them some kind of experience that substitutes that.
Right. The simple framework I always use is like, hey, are you trying to lift a weight or complete an exercise? You're trying to challenge a muscle, and people hear that.
100%.
Oh, I get it. Okay, well, this is going to challenge your muscle more. Do you feel that? And it's like, oh yeah, I feel it. And then all of a sudden, they're usually bought in. Some guys are still going to be like, hey man, I still want to lift that 125 pounds for 30 reps. I get it.
Yeah.
There's got to be an egocentric component there somewhere. But if you actually want to build muscle, start paying attention to what the muscle does, what it's capable of doing right now, and how to challenge that.
Yeah, and I think the idea that a lot of times you have to get to the athlete and understand what they're experiencing. But I think I even said this to you when we first met way back when, and I said, if you could look the way you look, and it was possible just to lift 5 pounds. I don't know if you remember me saying that to you, or would you be okay with that? And there's a lot of people there are some people that say, no, I'm not okay with that. And that's fine. I totally don't have judgment. Now I know who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And then someone else says, man, if I could just lift 5 pounds and look like this, sign me up. And it's like, okay, that's a technique-based person that they're already decided, like, if you could get more out of less versus getting less out of more. And so that sense of, if I could make 5 pounds weigh, give you a stimulus that feels like it was 500, would you be okay with that? Would you be interested in trying to explore that? And when they're like, yeah, okay, like you can make it that hard? Sure. Let's see what we can explore, And there's lots of ways to make things harder. Like move things slower. You'd be shocked. Yeah. Move things slower. Feel muscle throughout the whole contraction. Only move through a range that you have contraction or you have ability to feel that muscle for. Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really avoid that. I mean, I think we're kind of built that way. Finish the exercise in the most comfortable way, when it's really like, no, go deep down into the depths of this is going to get uncomfortable.
The simple framing is just time, distance, then load, right? So first you challenge time, then you challenge distance, then you challenge load. That's the easiest frame for people to understand. It's like, if you can't first sustain this exercise over time, then don't begin to challenge distance. And if you can't challenge distance, then don't begin to challenge load.
Yeah, 100%. Preaching to the choir. That's where I start. I peel all the other layers off, and then we work on time. And that sense of time and control. And then from there, the exercise experience is usually what most people would pay for, right? It's like they just don't feel it, so they do more. They don't feel it, they do more and longer. They still don't feel it or see any results, so they just do more. Then they think there's some secret of the pros, aside from your videos and stuff like that. There are some secret of the pros. But at the end of the day, most of it's just that the pros adapt to exercise very quickly, regardless of
they fit exercises really
quickly. They fit exercise real well.
That was my default, right? That was my luck.
They fit, and they have good dimensions. Their joints and bones are built real well, and on the most part, they survive on some level in the early stages, and then they start seeing some results, and then they start mining where the results are. It's like that map again. Like, oh, here's where the gold is. We should dig here.
Man, I wish I had known this stuff when I was 15 years old. I started training, and I remember within 6 months of training, my elbows just killed me. And I was like, well, this must just be part of this whole weightlifting thing. My body must be learning.
This is the ticket I must pay.
And I was like, I want everyone to realize, like, if something hurts, you're doing something wrong. Like, barring a traumatic injury that's happened, like a car accident, like if you're training in the gym and it hurts, something is incorrect. That's not your genetic default. It's nothing more than you're doing something incorrectly. And there is a solution out there. And I like giving people the framing of the idea, like once you start doing correctly, the amount of work you have to do becomes so much less.
Yes.
Because you're actually getting, more bang for every rep. So much more stimulus and challenge to that muscle rather than just arbitrarily subjecting your body to more inflammation and more stress. There's actually this muscular response.
Yeah. How well you do something dictates all the other factors, right? All the other quantitative, like there's a whole other science of all the quantitative factors of rest periods and and stimulus and time and obviously load. There's a whole other factor there. But if you can't figure out how well to do something, then there's no metric involved.
It's the foundation of
like you're gonna give me $1 and I'll give you back 100. You'd be like, how many dollars can I give you today, Eric? Right? Well, that's the investment part. But you have somebody that says, you give me $100, I'll give you back $1. It's like, well, which one would you rather pay for? It'd be like, I'm happy to be on the $100 and you give you $1.
Right.
But most people have volumed so much. They've used all the quantitative things that they could throw at it, trying to stimulate and create growth. And on some level, the body's going to do that. But at some point, there's going to be a price. So there's going to be, you've kind of sold out early to do this thing. And eventually it's like, I want to make 1 pound weigh 100 pounds. I want to, and because you can track that, you can see results. I mean, I've seen ridiculous results on athletes and people in the bodybuilding community that just don't know how to lift. And I don't mean any disparaging.
No, it's true.
But it's like, wow, you are this developed.
Man, I was once
you
there.
look this awesome.
Yeah.
And you don't even understand how to do a bunch of things.
You're there on balls and no brains.
Yeah, you've got a lot of skill to try and figure out some compensations. But then as you guys get farther and farther up the ladder, this stiffer and stiffer competition means like you could stand on stage all day, no matter what level and beat me, but that's not, maybe that's level 1, or I don't know how bodybuilding works anymore, but, you could still show up on a stage and probably still win a show or do pretty good. At a certain point though, you're now standing against monsters. You're not standing against regular people anymore. Right. And now the window is getting smaller for what, you have to be perfect. Like, to me, a small sliver of something on a muscle doesn't matter that much at this bottom level. But the top level, oh no, that's not hard enough. That's not defined enough.
At our level, I couldn't risk sustaining an injury, right? Like I needed to. That's just why ultimately I was drawn to your solutions, is because I had so many injuries as a young aspiring bodybuilder and so many things that hurt. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. So how do we find things that make me not hurt? And once you guys started introducing me to this thought process, I was like, oh my goodness, like I can train just as hard, if not harder. It's actually way more challenging muscularly and aerobically because I'm actually using my muscles now. And not have any joint pain. As soon as that clicked from in my brain, I was sold, man. And I was the greatest disciple, right? I was like, how can I learn more? How much time can I spend with you guys? And once it clicked, man, I was just so grateful because I knew that in order for me to stand on stage with the top 10 guys in the world, I couldn't make a mistake. One injury, you're down.
You have to be the healthiest you can be.
Yeah, you can't work out if you're hurting, right?
Yeah,
I had some serious pain. That's when I started this stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, and I say that to athletes all the time. And obviously the upper end of the echelon is very easy to talk to, because there's metrics established, because there's performance pressure, there's time windows that they have to, so they have a currency that is very easy to negotiate around in terms of, you can speak to that level of performance. It's the people the next level down
that have no metrics.
They don't have to be on stage, October or whatever. They don't have to be ready for the race by this time. So they have a lot of leverage to kind of go to the gym and mess around and do some stuff and look in the mirror and think, I feel a little better, and, not really think about their mechanics or not think about what should have been effectively, helped so much further away. Like they should have been taking care of this a while ago. And, 10 years or 20 years of shitty lifting turns into, how did this happen? How did this happen to me?
Man, I said to people all the time is, the longer you continue with your shitty habits, like don't wait for something to break, because the longer you continue, the harder it is to break those habits, man. Like reteaching your nervous system how to contract and muscles how to move. Like, it's a long road. Like when someone comes to me and they're relatively new to this stuff, it's amazing. It's like a blank canvas. I can just like, hey, do this, put this here. And that's all their body knows. And when someone's been training for 20 years and is all jacked up, even myself, when trying to correct stuff, it takes so much longer. I'm like, God, I've been doing that wrong for 10 years. Damn it. Now it's going to take forever to fix it. And then you got to go down that path of never doing an incorrect rep because you're just going to reinforce that bad movement pattern. One question I have for you, do you think, we have so many athletes who are just, gas pedal. Do you think it's possible or likely that those athletes would be able to get to the same level and beyond with an intelligent approach to training? Like if they, came to you and they learned how to exercise.
Like if they could they could actually attain where they were now and or potentially
and beyond
farther. Yeah, sure. I think yes, I do think that there's you're looking at in some cases more and more genetically gifted people given more and more guidance early. Who knows where they go, right? In terms of
that's the trick. Early intervention.
Early intervention. You don't score any goals sitting in the penalty box or sitting upstairs watching from, it's like, okay, well, if I can keep you out of the penalty box, keep you on the ice, if I can keep you out of the sitting up in the stands watching because you're hurt, then you have a chance to have performance. So most of even if we're thinking about all the recovery methodologies you have out there, allow you to get back to the gym faster and then potentially train and create adaptive stress and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if one of the things is you're moving so poorly and your body's creating, a solution around what you're pushing at it and you don't understand how to correct that or you don't know even what you can do on your own, then that person down the road is going to break something and now you're back to, the best of great arms. Too bad about that knee. Yeah. Sorry, you blew his knees out on the leg press, that kind of thing. And so I think if you got into chance to intervene earlier and earlier, yeah, I think some of those amazing athletes that are saying, this is how I got there. It's like, no, I bet you could get there and past. And you could walk after that show.
Right.
You could.
Honestly, it's less effort too, right? And that's what I realized is like, yes, I always say, if anyone out there, if your only solution is I'm going to work hard, you're screwed.
Yep.
You're an idiot.
Yeah.
You need to work smart.
Yeah.
Before you can work smart. You need to learn to walk before you can run.
Yeah. And there's an interesting concept of an associate of mine that was working with a guy who, I guess he did some metabolic testing, and he kind of decided, his trainer, and he had brought an M.A.T. He had an M.A.T. experience and was like, man, this is great. His entire business model was, I can get you working harder than anybody else. Therefore, if I burn more calories, like I super calories in and out thing. And he said, if I can rev your metabolism faster than anybody else, I'm going to get you to lose weight, and I'm going to get you.
First, you have to learn how to do it correctly before you can push the gas
100%.
pedal.
But the interesting thing was he was working with, how can I get you to just, almost just output. Mm-hmm. And so he ends up getting hooked in with an M.A.T. guy, a friend of mine, and they have a dialogue, and he says, wow, I'm going to send all my A-type broker, trader guys, they're all pushing. So they already have the gas pedal mentality. Mm-hmm. And he signs them all up to go in and work with his M.A.T. guy more muscles working. That's going to drive the metabolism. Right. That's amazing. And so lo and behold, he's testing, and all his A clients are going, man, this is great. I feel better than ever, and I'm moving better than ever. And look, I'm losing weight. And he starts testing their metabolism, and all their metabolism markers are dropping. And he's freaking out because his entire business model is, I'm going to get you to burn more calories, and he can't figure it out. And I start laughing. I said, I know how this works, right? Because he's got a really inefficient system, a few muscles working really hard. And then someone comes along and helps more and more muscles show up. Yeah. And now you've got 500 muscles working well, or now you've got 200 muscles working well. Whereas before I had 7.
But theoretically, that should open you up to more opportunities to diversify 100%. The skill set, right?
But now they're more articulate. They can move better. They have greater facility. Right. They can actually train and create adaptive stress. Versus how can you make 7 muscles work for 200?
Right.
It's like, well, that's
I don't completely disagree,
and
I'm sure you don't, with the whole output model. Like, I always, when someone comes into my facility or comes to work with me, like, I'll always go through some assessment phases where I'm determining what you can actually use for output, right? Like, hey, what are the 4 to 5 things that we can use on a consistent basis where your body's just really good at this, and everybody has those.
Sure.
Let's use those for output. Let's get some metabolic stimulus from that. While in the meantime, we're building this skill set, like you say, building this resilient body to allow me to diversify
picking out where you're not
good
kind of thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think what the real action there is where you're good, and now how do you establish the good? Because most people would say where I'm good is where I lift the most weight,
right now,
or in some case where I feel I move full range of motion, and we've already established
that's a hard subjective measure.
We don't know what that is, So once you decide this is an exercise, they feel it where they're supposed to feel it, they move in the range, they look like they have control, by all means use that as a marker. That's now their gold standard, that kind of thing. I think if people had that, they're like, yep, you know what? My body's not under stress. Resting heart rates. those as metrics. Those are easy ones that when people start saying, yeah, I had this really hard workout, but I'm still sore the next day. And I think maybe got to do 5-day, 6-day splits and 2-a-days and stuff. I'm like, I don't know how people recover from that.
Yeah. And again, we've had conversations, I had a conversation recently with Andy, who, about heart rate variability.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
That's
amazing.
The metric. That's
amazing.
The metric.
Easiest, even if you don't have any, you have heart rate monitors in your phone nowadays. People have, between their iPhone or their iWatch or their, Fitbits and all these other different Garmin things. They got all kinds of heart rate variability that they could use. Yeah. And if they see an elevated heart rate, over a week, regardless of what your heart rate should be, if you see an elevated heart rate resting first thing in the morning, I'd be like, yeah, that's not a good day for you.
And there's also some subjective measures. I just finished writing a 6-page document about this, like subjective measures, simple as like, are you a little bit more vulnerable to irritation? Are you a little bit more responsive to loud noises? Are you a little bit less, patient,
reactive,
I guess?
Reactive.
Little things like that. Are noises a little more irritating to you? And like that's a pretty good subjective measure as to what your sympathetic your autonomic nervous system is doing. So there's a bunch of things like that. Like, and I use my kids as my guiding example, and it sounds terrible, but like when your kids are running around screaming and it's irritating you, it's not your kids.
Yeah, it's
like
not
you're just probably stressed or you're not sleeping.
No, it is your kids. I want to say it's my kids. But so my wife does something with her athletes. She's a volleyball coach, and very good volleyball coach, and she has for years, she does this with her athletes. She would go around and literally ask them each one, at the start of practice, give me 1 to 10 for your physical, intellectual, and emotional. And they have to, you'd see kids go, oh, I'm a 6, I'm an 8 physical, but I'm 4 emotional. It's like, okay, so how are you going to push that athlete today? Like physically they're kind of there, but man, they got stuff going on,
It's really interesting.
And so even if you just did that very simple kind of self-exploration and you don't have a coach, you don't have a coach to do it, and you say, okay. And I think a lot of us just tough out through stuff and we don't give us, like, I think I gave you the example the other day, we were talking and I said, I'm going to ask you for 100% of what you have. Now, if this is a car, you say, empty the gas tank. No problem, right? The athlete's fine. Oh, go empty the gas tank. Then the next day you come and say, I want you to empty the gas tank. They, okay, no problem. Now, if you drove 100 miles one day and I said, now that's the standard, but I don't know what's in the gas tank. Was that a full gas tank? If that was a full gas tank and you come in the next day with half that, and I say, I want you, and you're like, where's the 50 miles you're supposed to give me?
Right.
You did 50 and you're like, that's it, I'm empty. And you're like, no. The 100 was the standard. So if you didn't have any way of measuring that state of what takes gas out of the gas tank or what puts gas back in the gas tank, sleep, emotional state, I don't feel intellectually there, I'm having trouble concentrating, physically I'm okay, it's like, then that's not a full gas tank. So that might be something that people can act on that isn't, whether it's with a client or with a fellow worker outer, because if I'm working out with you, I'm going to be like, okay, great. What Ben does, I do. Exercise for exercise, set for set,
sure.
Rep for rep. God help me. I'm probably like, wow, one of us is not getting a good workout, or one of us is getting.
How do we begin to vary our stimulus then? In your perspective, like I come in, let's say, hey man, today I'm a 7 on my energy. Sure. I'm, intellectually I'm a 7, and emotionally I'm a 4.
Right. So some of my language would change. If this was you're my client, some of my language would change. I would certainly ask what's going on. If that's not an intrusion, I would sort of say, okay, then some of my stuff, I might be dealing with bigger rep numbers. We wouldn't be up into high load stimulus type stuff if they're just not there. You're looking at big loads and single digit type stuff, very power strength oriented. I might be, really thinking that's red letter day. You're saying I'm 8 and up, everything, I'd be like, okay, we can go after it. Yeah. There's no reason for me not to register. Okay, I can empty the tank at a pretty high level. I can challenge you with different language. I could challenge you with, stimulus, loud, loud, whatever. I could swear. Yeah. But, you come in and you're, if you're physically an 8, I don't even know if that's possible, but you're physically an 8 and the other stuff's in the toilet, I would kind of go, okay, here's the teddy bear. We're going to change, we're going to change. We're going to give you a hug and we're going to figure out how can we get some workout today. But it's not me we have to be partners in it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Right. And so as soon as they start participating on that level, they're already starting to be mindful. They're already starting to put themselves in a position where it's like, okay, wow, I'm not doing real well today. Now my expectations of myself might be in a more relatively normal place, as opposed to, man, I'm just terrible and I got to get onto this rack and I got to get this done and what's wrong with me? And, meanwhile, it's like, no, dude, you're kind of physically there, but the rest of you is just not. So it's like 3 buckets that are, should be full and they're not all full. So, we're going to lower the expectation and work within what you have.
Yeah, a lot of our demographic has date, like concrete dates. They have a timeline like, hey, I have to get this done by this time.
Sure.
What do you recommend?
So in that model, let's say we borrow that. The person has I got to get ready by this date. I got to do what I got to do. If they're dragging themselves further and further through those workouts, they'd be better, again, if you could kind of peel this back. It's mostly just insecurity. Certainly Peter that we both know and love, who passed away. It was, he knew as much as he knew. It was a lot to get him out of, this is what I have to do.
Sure,
like, you teach this to people and you have trouble, this is what I have to do to be on stage because this is what's always worked for me.
Sure.
And so obviously
he was bad nutritionally too, which is common.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The closer you get to competition, the harder it is to have a conversation about what should change.
Yep.
So a competition athlete, we dance with who brung you kind of deal.
That's the way I approach it.
I don't change a lot.
Learn in the off season.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what I did with Derek, right? 16 weeks out, I'm like, dude, if you're going to let me steer this ship, then you're going to let me steer the ship, and I'm going to guide you in, and you're going to be nasty. So for the first 8 weeks, it's all learning. It's all like, I'm going to teach you everything I can possibly teach you in the short amount of time. And then you hit a certain point, and that's subjective time, where you're like, okay, now I'm not teaching you anything. I just want you to do what you can with the skill set you've currently got. And then next year, after this competition, now we're going to go back to teaching you something new.
That's fantastic. I don't think I'd have anything to improve upon that. That's that sense of, in the off season, we can explore different modalities. We can explore different strategies because we have time and places and ways to measure it that, I don't have to get you on stage tomorrow, so we're not changing stuff. It's that sense with athletes in competition. The last thing you want to have an athlete do is feeling insecure about I did not do something, versus I've proven it works for me already in off season, and then I bring it into my season, and then I'm on stage with this amazing thing that I feel comfortable and confident that it was part of my success.
This comes back to that paradigm of muscle confusion, the mistake or the misnomer of muscle confusion, the necessity of that, right? It's like, you don't need to confuse muscles. You need a novel stimulus, but you need to first and foremost do the things that you can do well and actually challenging the muscles. So most people would say, I'm for a contest, so I need to be doing more exercises and more volume and all these things. The reality is you may not. Like, do what you're capable of doing, do what you can do well.
Stay in your wheelhouse. Stay in your wheelhouse. I think that's a big one, that if people are, I think, again, back to confusion. I mean, a lot of athletes, I've talked to lots of different trainers of different sports, from Major League Baseball, basketball, obviously NFL, CFL, definitely NHL. They just throw everything at the athletes, right? And so it's like, I'm not sure what works, so we'll do it all.
Well, because that works in athletics. Like, as it's unfortunate in the young ages. People are just said, hey man, run faster, score more goals, jump higher, you get a positive result.
Sure.
So the more you do, the more likely you are to get this positive result. And then it's just weeding out by a process of who doesn't break.
Right.
And that's what they do in pro sports.
Yeah, who survives that process?
Dude, it's happening with my son at 6 years old as a hockey player. I'm like, they just have no idea how to build a skill set. They have no idea how to teach skills, like on ice and off ice, no idea how to create a strong athlete.
Yeah.
You do that stuff, even at 6 years old, and that could differentiate between someone actually becoming a pro athlete and not becoming a pro athlete. Not that I want to push the parents down that route.
No. But that sense of historical continuity is a big one. Like, this is what we all did. This is what we all do.
So
and some sports are notoriously poor. Andy's leading the charge. Probably at the other end, Andy with the Penguins is leading the charge of really investigating some very exciting and on the forefront of looking at some of the sports science. Because that's who he is. That's how he is, right? He's always reading and looking and can quote a study to you in no time flat. Most of the baseball can be traditionally terrible. definitely NHL can be traditionally terrible because any sport that's been around a long time, they're just very inclusive, and that's what we do.
Yeah, they've had success with one guy or
And
two
that's
guys, and all of a
what we
sudden
do.
everybody else gets the same
Everybody
thing. You
gets-
just weren't strong enough. You didn't eat well enough. You didn't sleep well enough.
Yeah.
You're not a strong enough human being.
Yeah, and I think that the sad part is when you see somebody succeed despite all that stuff, then they become, I use this example. We had a goalie, a really good example of we had a really good goalie here in Toronto a number of years ago, and he was just really reactive. He was very physically able, and I remember laughing. I said, well, if he had a dad that threw rocks at his head every day, and he survived that process, he could open up a hockey camp and hand out rocks to parents and charge $500 because people would be like, that's how you make an NHL goalie. You just throw rocks at their heads, know? He survived that process. And I think that the bodybuilding community, the sports community, can get dragged into, what do the pros do? What do the pros do? Or, that's what the pros do. And it's like, none of that is comparable, like, it's okay to have a jump off point or a landing point to say, okay, I'm going to start looking at what they do. Is there some stuff? But then it's investigation. Then it's investigation of, do I even feel that? Where am I supposed to feel that? Right. Like a yoga class is fine, but yoga doesn't spill in there any different. Where am I supposed to feel that? Same things with Pilates.
What's my objective? What's my outcome?
Yeah, there's no magic in Pilates. It's like a lot of isometrics and control and stuff. It has got some amazing uses, but does it do everything? No. Bodybuilding? No. It's more like you have to explore. You could do some yoga and some Pilates, something, and some gymnastics training. And, but if you felt all that and owned all of it, you'd probably see some awesome results. Right. And so some powerlifting, but not all of it. But I'm not a power lifter. So how can I borrow some of those techniques? How can I borrow some of those methodologies?
Right. Everybody just wants the quick solution, right? It's human nature.
Well, it's almost all or nothing. It's like, Pilates, and they all run over there.
Right.
And then it's like, well, that didn't do it.
But I see this pro bodybuilder in the magazine or on the internet doing this. Therefore, I should do it now, even though I'm not anywhere near.
Even though I'm not
prepared.
I'm a 40-year-old man who's 50 pounds overweight,
and he's been practicing that for 10 to 15 years that you've never seen, and he's really good at it. But if you're not at his level yet, you suck, and you might as well fail because you might as well give up because you don't have the genetics, right? Quote unquote.
Or keep doing it until it hurts.
Yeah,
something falls
breaks.
off.
Yeah, and it's just this paradigm that people don't understand. It's always the process, right? Because I really believe that most, and Tom and I had a discussion about this, and he didn't agree with me, but I really believe that most people, you can become a professional. He
didn't agree with you?
He didn't.
Oh.
Most people, you're not going to become a professional bodybuilder, but you can build an amazing physique for what you've got.
Yes.
I really believe that.
Yes, I do. I do.
Yeah, and he just said, well, yes, but,
Well, inter and intra, right? Like you to you or you to the bodybuilding world, right?
You to you, yeah.
Right, you to you, I think, yes, everybody can improve.
Yeah.
I think I have to start with that everybody can own this, everybody can be accountable, everybody can be better version of themselves, right? Whether we're talking about emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever, that we can all strive to. I have to work from that premise that they want to be a better version of them, right?
The best version of them, like the greatest.
Totally.
Yeah, and man, the more I dig into this stuff, like this physical piece is obviously a big part of it, a big part of my life, but realize the reason that people can't, and I've dealt with a lot of high-level athletes like you have, it's always the brain, man.
Yeah.
It's always their belief, it's always their
there's some belief
beliefs.
systems you have to drill down to.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you have to find some currency that they are locked onto and negotiate around that currency and recognize, substitution is big, because they've attached themselves to something. So you have to find something that you can't just take stuff away. You can't just say, whatever you know is garbage. Whatever you know, you don't know anything. It's like most people are walking out the door there, unless you got a really weird person that likes that kind of negative feedback. And then you should not train that person either. Like, wow, if they treat me like crap, I like that. And it's like, no, that's not the person you want. But that sense that most people need to be built up on some level, that they need to be broken down in a gentle way. They need to be in a specific way, in a strategic way that allows them to really know why their plateaus are where they are. And some of those could be, as you said, even the spiritual, emotional, there could be stuff that, they're dealing with, like why compulsive behavior, that kind of stuff. There could be nutrition components and sleep components and things that they need to understand that exercise doesn't solve it. Exercise doesn't solve why they're uncomfortable, why they're in pain or whatever. And That's the most tragic part I find. They're going to the gym, they're doing stuff. It's like driving, full speed into a wall and the door is like 1 inch over and eventually they think the door will show up. I think that's the most tragic thing. It's like, you have to pay attention. You have to, investigate. Obviously, yes, therapy is out there. But if the therapist is just putting you back together again and you go back and Humpty Dumpty jumps off the wall, you're kind of like, yeah, a therapist is not helping you, right. But it's not the therapist's fault. Does that make sense? You're going back to the same poor out. So if somebody feels like, man, I got rid of pain, then I went back to the gym or the trainer and I'm back to being hurt, there could be some dialogues around, what are your expectations? How are you moving? Are you geared, is your trainer or you or both geared completely towards these sort of external measures? Yeah, I know you feel terrible, but look, you lifted more weight, or look, you lost more weight. You lost more weight. You got thinner, but you have pain all over your body, but look, I'd be thinking, yeah, get another trainer or delve a little deeper into your goal system.
So I think almost, I'd probably comfortably say 90% of the people listening will have some manifestation of injury or pain. Can you walk us down the path of, I have this goal, I want to accomplish this goal by this timeline, yet I still somehow feel attached to doing this exercise.
Right.
What do I do? Is it an activation thing? Is it a limited range of motion thing? Is it a combination? Is it stop being an idiot and go do a different exercise?
Stop. I think the stop doesn't happen anyway.
Yeah.
So that's we can throw that off the list. They don't stop.
Or we should say you should.
It might be
stop.
modified. Yeah. Might be modified. You give them a substitution. Say, hey, I need you to do this exercise, but in a range you can feel it. So that would be the first
different angle.
Find a different angle, or the fact that people do 12 different exercises for bicep, and I'm like. Wow.
I do one well, right?
Yeah, why don't you do one well, and then you might be able to do two well. And,
right.
I might have crippled people that ask me to train arms for an hour. And I'm like, arms? No, bicep. Oh, for an hour. Wow. Okay. You don't actually know what you're talking about, but okay.
7 minutes.
Let's do that. 7 minutes later, someone's throwing up, whatever. And you're like, okay, we got 53 more minutes. Let's go.
Right. Let's go take a nap.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the negotiation of where they are in the timeline, as you said, if they're early in the sort of prep, you got a lot of room. Once you start changing diet on a very specific level, once you start losing body fat and, affecting some other hormonal things, it's getting harder and harder to start to want to change the course, doing big course corrections further along, unless there's some very obvious, like, wow, that is really hurting. First abandon, or at least take a day off. That would be the most simple thing if I'm looking at nobody, which I'm nobody. Nobody's in front of me right now. Mm-hmm. So if I'm listening to that kind of dialogue, somebody asked me that question, I would say, take an extra day off and then go back to the activity. Try something that feels like half time, half intensity. So, half the weight, half the time, half the reps, whatever, and explore just even for a warm-up set and or even for that workout, see if you can do that with all those sort of things cut in half. Can you explore and get through that exercise without pain, without the pain that you've been recurring? Like, that doesn't hurt my wrist that way. It's like, okay. But at some point, once you start if you can get pain-free motion, no matter what you have to sacrifice to get there, then you start adding any of those other elements back in, and you get to, there's my elbow pain or there's my wrist pain. Then you know what you added. Like, you can say, well, I was good to 50 pounds, but I went to 60 and I was up at 100, somehow surviving that. But at 60 pounds, that's when my pain comes back. Be like, okay, drop it down below that and work out at that level where you can have pain-free motion. Because pain-free motion is going to be, like, people, I think, don't have an understanding of bodybuilder pain, normal, and back to that, that's common, not normal. That's very not normal. And not every bodybuilder has pain there. This is a group of people that might have sore muscles, but sore muscles and sore joints are very different things. So expect to be uncomfortable and have sore muscles. Yeah. But when you have knee pain and joint pain, or muscles pain really close to where a joint surface is, that would be something to watch out for. That would be like, hey, whoa, there's something going on wrong. And if you're getting closer and closer to that prep, things are not getting easier for you.
Right.
As you get closer to competition, things are getting harder and heavier. And
sure.
And you hopefully have some strategies around how you're progressing loads or how you're taking loads off just to create stimulus. And if you're not, and you're just going balls to the wall the whole time, chances are maybe you survived that. And, you don't survive a second or a third or a fourth show, that kind of thing.
Yeah. How do you approach people who have bilateral disparities?
I probably train single limb stuff a lot more than most people. I challenge a lot of stability.
Starting with the weak side first, like do you have
I think you have to. Yeah,
reps?
I think a lot of people are so worried. Like my one arm is so much bigger than the other. Assuming we're not talking about joint problems here, they have sort of something that is overdeveloped, whatever that means, compared to the other side. And so I might say, yeah, you need to challenge the weak side as hard as you can. And people are so worried.
Meaning you could do more with that side than you would with the strong side?
No, the weak side probably has to catch up, but it's being trained the same as the strong side.
Got it.
And so it's getting further and further out of whack. It's getting further and further out of what it can do. Like I can lift 100 pounds on one side and I can lift 80 on the other side, but I put it in a machine where I can lift that combined, but I'm picking up more load on the other side. You know, like I'm in a leg press.
Call it neurological training.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. It's non-neurological. Yeah.
Exactly.
Non-neurological. But people think that if I train my left side at 80 and I train my right side at 100, my 100 side is going to get so much bigger, so much faster, and the disparity will just keep getting bigger. I'm like, well, you can't train the 80. It sounds stupid, but you can't train the 80 side with something it can't lift. Mm-hmm. But somehow you compensate to finish the lift, and it's never going to catch up. So I would say you got to bring it right down. And if you can't train one side versus the other, excuse me, and you keep locking them into, machines that allow you to kind of, train them both together, that disparity just stays there and potentially down the road further goes into injury. Like that sets you up for some really poor injuries.
Yeah. Do you see any commonalities as to why those things happen?
I think usually there can be some, there can be some dominance. There can be some probably just common stability things with spine, hips, pelvis. I think a lot of things that people don't realize about how they stabilize their hips or how their spinal function dysfunction might, I'm thinking about arms right now, unfortunately, in my brain, but
sure.
Amount of rotations or amount of dorsiflexion for feet could dictate totally different stresses on quads, in hip musculature. If you had different stability issues in your spine and pelvis, that might display different scapular positions, and those different scapular positions turn into different forces when you pick up a dumbbell and do a side lateral or do a press or something like that. And that just different stimulus with lots of mileage on it turns into you ended up in a whole different place.
That's the way you look now.
Yeah. That's what you did. You don't look the same.
That's something M.A.T can fix.
Yes, I'm very confident in saying that. A lot of people would come to me, obviously for the dysfunction side. The bodybuilding community very often can do that, but sometimes the bodybuilding community comes to me with aesthetics. That somebody's
balance me out, man.
Yeah, or you see the classic, dude, train your legs, or do you ever do calves? This would never be you, but right. It would be but it would be one of those things where that person goes, I don't. You don't have any calf training videos out right now?
Sure I do.
Do you? Yeah. Okay. So, is that the training that you do that made them like that, or do you think you were pretty well blessed to start with?
I think it was a combination.
Combination, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you found a way to improve it, but you started a little better than most of us. Yes.
Yeah, I was in good shape.
Right.
Yeah,
and so
I was pretty muscular.
So chances are you moved really well, or your adaptation went to your calves.
Big old feet and weak old feet.
Big, he has a big old feet. So something you did or were doing poorly, or even a dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
How many times have you ever seen a really heavy person and you go, man, they got great calves? Have you ever seen that?
Sure.
You're just like, wow, look at those amazing calves. And then they lose some weight and they're like, still got really great calves. And you're like, wow, should we all just gain more weight? Is that a strategy? I don't think that's a good idea.
It's funny because when I first met you guys, I don't know if it was you or Peter said, I was like, oh man, look at these things. They're never going to tear. The calves is, 2 inches thick.
I had that conversation with you.
I think it was you. And I was like, oh, no. And I think she's like, oh, no, that's why they may tear, because all these other things around there are dysfunctional. Now all your body knows is putting load through those calves for this plantar flexion movement.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was like, there's no way. Like, they're so thick. And now as I sit here, they're both torn.
Right.
Which is pretty crazy, right? Like, you think this, the strongest muscle I had, the biggest muscle I had. I trained it every day for 5 years. I mean, the big mistake that I made was heeding people's advice and not training them for a while because they look too big. And then you obviously start to lose function, you start to lose strength, you load it in some way by accident that you weren't expecting, all of a sudden, bang. And I didn't even know they tore. But there's so many interesting considerations when you think of dysfunction and why things develop the way they do. And you look at these bodybuilders and go, God, that guy's got this really big body part. Why does that happen? That's how my brain works.
Yeah, there's the starting tight end for Buffalo that I work with. He has these huge biceps, right? And I'm like, dude, what the, and he's like, they ask me all the time, I don't do anything for my biceps, right? And the bodybuilder world would be like, what? That's unfair, but it's like, sure enough, I go through his mechanics. He has some wrist and elbow mechanics that are really poor. And lo and behold, it drives impingement, and bicep picks up the slack for what his forearms can't do. So he's had dysfunctional forearms that create other issues, right? And lo and behold, it creates better biceps. And so then the problem down the road says, that sounds great, except he catches a ball for a living.
Sure.
And needs to put his arms, above his head in some scenarios, and has to block people, and so needs some functioning shoulders. So lo and behold, where do you think some of his injuries might show up? Or where might he be at risk?
Right.
You'd go, I'd never tear a bicep. And like, look at the size of those biceps. Like,
right.
Sure enough, yeah, he could easily, that would be down the road of what I'm working to avoid, is that he tears this thing that's picking up all this extra load for him.
Yeah, that's one thing with my calves. Yeah, they were a little bit bigger than, I don't think they were blessed by any stretch. Maybe they were bigger, but trained them every day for a long time. But the other thing that I did by accident was, again, putting myself into shoes that caused foot dysfunction, which I don't want to advocate anybody doing that, but I'm sure that contributed to my lack of motion through my foot.
Yeah.
Therefore, there was more necessity of this kind of plantar dorsiflexion movement that was just happening in this linear plane without any pronation at my foot.
Sure, yeah.
And all of a sudden, my calves start to grow. And
I think the best thing you can see some of these people doing in the community of bodybuilding now, for sure, is training with some. I mean, this is not a product endorsement for sure, but there's more zero drop shoes, more flat, open, kind of mobile shoes that I think most people are probably getting benefit from, because
talk to me about that.
Well, I think that the reality is you've got a lot of people that don't even understand how much structure in their shoes is just orthotics, right? They're just made by Adidas and Puma and Nike, and they've decided, a podiatrist somewhere along the line has said, this is what we should see in a foot. This is what an orthotic looks like. This is how we promote, sort of a sculptural neutral of the foot. And so then Nike said, okay, and Nike and every shoemaker said, we can just put that in our shoes. And lo and behold, motion-controlled shoes were born, and now people can run that could never run before because they would have had foot or knee or hip problems. And now the shoe allows them to do that. What a great product. Nike makes lots of money, and shoe companies make lots of money with now specializing equipment that then allows you to go running. So it's like, oh, go running barefoot. Oh man, my feet, ankles are hurting. It's like, oh, here's this shoe. Enough cushioning, enough support. This is all great. And the person goes, now I can go run. Thank you, Nike.
Is it leading to dysfunction?
Yeah. Yeah. I see tons of it. Now, again, I'm not looking at the whole population wearing shoes. Sure. But you look at indigenous peoples that don't wear shoes. Their feet sort of look like shoes, in terms of big soles, and they have feet that sometimes look more like your size, and yet you watch them scampering around barefoot all over the place, and it seems like not a big deal. You put them in shoes, they become heel strikers right away. Their posture changes, and I'm not advocating living in Toronto here in Canada going barefoot all time, all year long. That would suck in the snow, but
I'm sure they did, man.
At some point, somebody had to figure it out. I think we can still. We don't have to become paleo people, but I think the idea that, foot covering, if you're going to start to evolve or start to work on better foot function, that would have some pretty dramatic spillover into, better and better body function, right? I would agree with some of the dialogue that podiatrists say, or some of the dialogue that some of the chiropodists say about better functioning feet equals better body. Even Chinese medicine, reflexology, there's some stuff that talks about that. I would agree. I might have a different path. As how I get there. I think muscles control. I think most people don't even understand foot function on a bigger level, in terms of what muscle function helps down there. So that's in itself its own rabbit hole,
Well, let's go there, man. Walk me, at least get me started in that path. Like,
so
what
I
do
think,
people need to understand?
my opinion, I think somewhere along the line, probably around maybe World War I or whatever, 4F became flat foot is bad. That's my opinion. That somewhere somebody decided flat foot was unfit to serve. And so when somebody's feet were flat, they just didn't want to invest in making you a soldier and train you. And
Interesting.
So I think somewhere along the line, somewhere people decided that was unhealthy because you're now unfit to serve. Therefore, there's something wrong with you. So people come in all the time. They apologize for their feet being flat. Oh, I know my feet are flat and my feet are flat. And I'm like, no, you're low. You just have a low arch. A flat foot is a very different thing than an arch that's relatively low.
Right.
And so, people could apologize for their high arches too. Like that's also another dysfunction. Right. And so imagine if you had a shoe, like you and I are, what size are you?
12.
12. Okay. So we're both the same size. So our feet are the same.
Sure, they're identical.
The fingers and toes and all that stuff's identical.
Exactly.
But
We're
after
both at
that,
5.
so when you start going, well, wait a minute, every person that's a size 12, and you and I are just a very small population now, right? N of 2. We don't have the same feet. So every person that has a size 12 gets the same shoe. Mm-hmm. Now, if you get the same arch support, you get the same heel cup, you get the same cushioning, that means every person that we admittedly have said has a different foot is now being told they have the same foot. So think about that somebody that's been given standard arch support, standard heel cup, anti-pronation, right? Even if they start modifying, is being corrected like they are all the same. And yes, on some level, we all have the toes and we all have the bones, etc. But after that, we're rapidly very different, right? And so what I think when you start seeing more flatter shoes or stuff that's available is that the person is going to be allowed to fall into where they need to go. They're going to be allowed for some motion that normally is being corrected for, that in some cases doesn't even need to be corrected. And orthotics aren't bad. I'm not against orthotics, but they're at best a cast, and there's uses for them. But I think they've been, my opinion, they've been kind of pushed into this very, very, very lucrative market of they will solve everything, and that everybody needs to be corrected.
How much does foot function play into knee and hip dysfunction?
Massive. I mean,
is that usually the number one place?
Yeah. So when I'm talking to an athlete, it's a pretty easy conversation for most people. That most athletes invest in bigger horsepower. Like if I said, Ben, I'm not a car guy, but if you were a car guy and picture a very fast car, picture anything, your dream car, and I say, you know what, 600 horsepower, I don't know. I'm not a car guy, but most people can come up with some pretty looking something. It's a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or something. I say, I'll give you another 100 horsepower on top of that. They're like, oh, this is amazing. That car is so fast. And I say, I'm going to give you grandma's old tires. Now the problem is you got all this horsepower and grandma's old tires. Grandma's old engine, grandma's old tires. That's okay. That's a good ratio because that car never moves fast and It's fine. But now you've got really poor tires on a really high engine, horsepower engine. Now you have a disparity that is so big. And look at all kinds of athletes with all kinds of torque injuries, abdominal tears, sports hernias, groin strains that don't go away, SI joint dysfunction, all these other things that are, piriformis syndrome, all these things that are torque injuries. Right? And you're like, man, I don't know why me? It's like, well, you're pounding up horsepower like crazy. Lots of people train, core strength, trunk and spine, lots of hip motions, and you have a disparity with foot function. It's like, yeah, that's a recipe for a problem. Does that make sense?
Sure it does.
Yeah. And I think that's the big challenge is that people are constantly told, like most physios that I talk to don't know an awful lot about feet. It's almost a weird thing. Like they understand bone breaks and traumas and stuff like that. But if you ask them about foot function, most of them are like, I studied it, but I don't.
Right. Do you have any tidbits or like little bits of information you could share with the audience? Like, hey, this is what you should look for. I know that's a very broad statement, but like how to approach walking. Like, is there a general stride that people should be aiming for? Is there a thought process you walk through when you taking somebody down the case?
I mean, a big one that I we're talking very broad generalities of like, I'm not giving anyone feedback. I'm not watching what they're doing and correcting for that. But a lot of times people, because of some of our shoe wear and understanding weird things about posture, most of us are very big heel strikers, very big heel strikers. Yeah, and that I think is less optimal for sure.
Should it be a toe or a
I would say where my people say this is almost a political argument now, but where I fit is more of a midfoot striker. If we're talking about walking and running.
walking? No, both the same?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think most people deal with overstride. If I take it all the way up to, if I fix it at walking, trust me, it's there in running, or if you fix it at high speed, the fastest runner, sprinter that I work with, and I work my way back through to longer distance runners, I work my way back to walkers, the same solution is there.
Overstride is too long?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a silly thing that if you, I don't know how many steps most people take to finish a marathon, but if I took 20,000 steps to finish a marathon and somebody said, if you could stretch your stride 1 more inch, that's 20,000 inches you don't need to run. And that sense of, longer stride is better. It's like, no, longer stride, that's what we would call overstride, that kind of thing. But if you started thinking about being on top of your front foot when you run or walk, then I saw a video of Usain Bolt, and you see his leg. He's very long, right? He's a big, long guy. And you see his leg go way out in front of him. By the time his upper body is on top, by the time his foot hits the ground, he's actually right on top, and he's in a forward lean. And most people have no sense of that. I find that's a really weird, easy but weird concept for most people, that they're like, I never even thought about leaning forward, But if anybody as a little kid, you picture yourself, I'm going to get ready to run a race. Almost everybody leans over and gets ready to run a race. Well, the faster you want to run, the more you have to lean. So if we take that all the way back to walking, there's still a lean there. It's just not as severe. Does that make sense that way? Right? And so the idea that if you're leaning forward, it's that your middle is on top of your front foot by the time it lands. Most of us are relatively upright, and as we step forward, we're on our back foot as we land, and the only thing we do is heel strike. And so that lends itself to all kinds of weird posture and gait issues that I think could be simplified, and it's like, don't take too long a stride. I'm a long-legged guy. That usually inherently means lazy. Most of us are pretty lazy. If we move like a giraffe, it's like, I'll just let my leg swing do it. Or if somebody says to me, I'm a really fast walker, I'm always like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. And do you get any fitness response from walking? No. And I'm like, okay, then you're doing it poorly.
Well, explain that. So I should expect a fitness response?
Yeah. So for sure, most of it's, so if I give this example to clients all the time. So if I ask you to picture yourself drumming, like a little drum, and I say, I want you to drum faster, what do? You drum faster.
Sure.
Do you drum bigger? No. So what do most people want to do when they want to walk faster?
Longer strides.
They take bigger strides. They don't walk faster. They walk bigger strides. So they cover more distance. Bad? That's where they get into overstride. That's when you can't. Like, if by all means, you take a bigger stride, that means you're running.
Yeah.
By all means, take more steps. So if you take more steps, especially if I looked at you and I said, you know what, we're going to get you to walk, but I'm going to get you to walk fast. And you have to turn over faster. That's the engine. That's the thing that drives the bus for all that, horsepower. And it's like, yeah, walk faster. Not walk longer, not cover more ground in a faster time. More turnover. And immediately you'll see fitness response from people, right? It's like, oh my God, this feels like I'm about to run. Like, yeah. Does that feel like effort now? Yeah. You're still walking.
Right.
Oh man, I thought walking was, strolling, saving energy. And that's a funny thing. The body is completely, again, my opinion, I feel like the body is completely designed around finding a solution. So making you the most efficient possible could be about saving the most amount of energy. And here we are in the exercise community saying, no, I want you to do something that's expensive. And the body's like, really? If you don't pay attention, I'm going to make this cheap. I'm going to find a way to disperse this. I'm going to find a way to throw this in a joint. I'm going to find a way to not make this so expensive for you. And so if you said, okay, I have to understand that paradigm of I'm working against something my body might be, it doesn't know how many reps you're going to do. It just knows, man, how do I go and keep going? If he does this for an hour, how am I I better start changing it so that no rep's the same, so I can kind of move the fatigue around. And you're like, no, I want you to do it exactly like this, so the fatigue is right here. Oh, that's not something we're wired for. So I think you have to have an agreement with yourself about being uncomfortable and where that load's supposed to go. understanding the body's trying to figure out how to be efficient and save you from this thing that you're doing, right? Trying to spread it out, and find an adaptation. So that idea of cheating now becomes, well, I need to understand why my body do that. Here's why I want to direct that work. Here's why I want to create this stimulus where I want it, and how I have to understand that the numbers are always going to work towards making it cheaper. If you get focused on so many different, quantity things, it's always going to be, how can I cheapen this?
Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden, all that work in the gym is going somewhere else. Right. If nothing else, like your bones don't adapt that way. Your joints don't adapt that way. So that's a tough one.
Dude, you're awesome.
Thank you very, very much.
I'm so grateful for your time
dude.
and all your wisdom as always, man.
Super grateful.
I want to send everybody to you. So I think everyone should get on a flight and come see Eric.
Come see me personally.
Nobody else, Eric only. Truthfully, man, you've added so much to my life, and you continue to do so. And I'm so grateful for you giving us your time today.
Oh, I'm grateful for having a chance to chat with you again. That's
Thanks,
great.
man. I'm going to have you back on again and pick your brain.
Okay, I have to come to Tampa then, I guess.
Yes, you do.
Perfect.
Join us on benpakulski.com to learn the cutting-edge techniques to take control of your body, your brain, and create your greatest life.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pakulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.